but their forests. I do not imagine that is 5%. We are seeing tons and tons of timber or logs being felled every day. But my most substantive question, Mr. Speaker, is on the, something that we are seeing from especially Kilifi County on the harvesting of giant baobabs, and they're being said to be transported to I don't know which country for what purpose. And because she is the minister who is in charge of forestry and environment, I would want to know what framework is there between our country and whichever country those baobabs are going, and why they believe that we do not need them and they are needed elsewhere.
Honorable Sears.
Thank you, Senator Methu. The question of ensuring that we are actually confining our harvesting to the 5% is extremely pertinent, Honorable Senator, and it calls on strict, diligence from the Kenya Forest Service, and I must assure you that I'm aware of that. We have had to do serious operations, which I want to assure the Senate that they will be consistent and persistent. We have had interdictions of Kenya Forest Service officers. We have had impounding of forest products, which are going beyond the allowable, plantation forests. And that is an exercise that will continue to make sure that then we don't have people taking advantage of the commercial plantations to go into our indigenous forests, because that is not allowed. So it's good for the Senate to know that we are keen on that. We just recently did a recruitment of additional enforcement officers in the form of forest rangers, and we are bringing on board the Green Army, and that is in the understanding that we have to hasten the enforcement to make sure that no illegalities are happening in our forests. With regards to the baobab trees, sometime late last year is when this issue came up in Kilifi County, where there was an uprooting of 8 baobab trees, and we delved into the issue in the ministry through NEMA and Kenya Forest Service, and actually established at that point that indeed the trees were uprooted by a certain company with the intention of establishing a botanical garden in Georgia. We followed that through, and upon establishing that due process was not followed, we stopped the exportation through the channels, even through KPA, and for a period of time, the relevant agencies, NEMA, Kenya Forest, KEFIS, and the county government of Kilifi engaged with the project proponents. And up to this point, there has been clearance issued upon establishing that they have followed the due process. Honorable Methu, the uprooting and exportation of baobab trees is not illegal in itself. It is within the ambit of trade in our genetic resources. We are party to the Convention on Biodiversity, which allows for such trading. Both, within, investors can engage in trade in genetic resources within Kenya and outside Kenya. But there is a due process that has to be followed, and that is what we have to ensure is happening. And just to also inform that we are, the export of the attempted export, and now I think it's going on, was the first of its kind, and therefore, going forward, we have had discussions with the county government of Kilifi, and I'm sure it might arise in any other county in this country. The thing to look out for is to ensure that we are doing it within due process, to ensure that the benefits accruing to the affected communities are authentic and are being done in a transparent manner, and also to ensure that any accruing benefits to the government are being realized adequately. Thank you very much.
Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish also to appreciate the answers by the CS. But Madam CS, Mochongo settlement scheme in Baringo, the residents in this settlement scheme have stayed for a very long time without title deeds. A process was initiated to have the NEMA process done. And the last time I knew Madam CS was that the NEMA was supposed to complete the process of environmental impact assessment to enable you now to take the matter perhaps to the cabinet and finally to Parliament for us to do the needful. Can you confirm to this House, Madam CS, if that has been done? Because we really need people in Mochongo settlement scheme to have their title deeds.
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would need time. Honorable Senator of Baringo County to be able to issue a substantive response to this one.
CS. Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First and foremost, I want to thank the Honorable CS for the good work that he's doing all over the world, all over the country. Honorable Speaker, my question is that Waziri, that you are aware that the ASAL areas actually have a lot of challenge in water, and afforestation programs cannot be succeed very well. So is there any plan for affirmative action plan for the ASAL areas? In the past, there used to be the greening of the schools, where we used to have all the schools being given seedlings, and the schools used to have some kind of competition for greening, and where they used to give some awards. Finally, there is this business of the carbon credit footprint business. This is actually benefiting most of it foreigners, and the same forest, the same trees, the same plants they're using our forests and our trees. However, the locals are not benefiting much. And actually, most Kenyans even don't understand what the carbon credit is actually. And therefore, I don't know what your ministry will be able to, your ministry is doing, so at least the Kenyans can also benefit, because now I can see most of the ranches, large ranches, what do you call the conservancy areas. There's a lot of money that is being given to the managers, especially the foreigners, and most of them are, the big guys. But however, the neighboring communities don't benefit. So I don't know what intervention or plan you have so that this money can also trickle down to the locals around the conservancies. Thank you.
CS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Senator Abbas. Indeed, the arid and semi-arid lands portend the highest for our tree growing initiative to succeed. This is where we have the land available in large sizes. And yes, we have to do affirmative action of sorts. And we are in discussion with the Ministry of Water to start with because of the weather conditions in the arid and semi-arid lands, which don't give us the opportunity to do massive tree growing because of the unpredictability of the rains and the likes. We have the plans for the schools, but we must match this with the availability of the necessary infrastructure, key of which is water. So there are discussions, even at we are engaging with the counties through the Council of Governors for a specialized strategy for the ASALs, which we must get right, because then we cannot succeed with our 15 billion tree initiative without the full utilization of the availability of land in the ASAL areas. The seed balls technology is one that we are exploring with the seed balls technology, which helps with the dispersion of seeds in very vast areas for planting of indigenous species of trees, which is what would thrive more in the arid and semi-arid areas, is one of the strategies we are looking at. From the counties affected by the Prosopis plant, I'm at an advanced stage of presenting a strategy to Cabinet for approval, for us to be able to have a management plan for the Prosopis, where we do, replacing the Prosopis with the acacia trees, which are the indigenous trees. And I know we have about 22 counties affected by the Prosopis in this country. And once you replace that with the acacia, it comes with a whole value chain of, livelihood support programs, including the resins and gum resources that are available to support the livelihoods of the community. So yes, we have that program in place. The question of carbon markets, it's been shrouded with a lot of lack of transparency in terms of the benefits that accrue to the communities. And Kenya is touted as the top trader in carbon, the top in carbon trading in the region at about 20–30%. But when you try to put a finger to what this is about, it's not clear. So what we have done, Honorable Abbas, is we have a carbon markets strategy and framework through amendment of the Climate Change Act. We have already, Honorable Speaker, submitted it to Parliament. The Leader of Majority is aware. Kenya is going to be the first in the region to actually put in place a carbon markets law and strategy, so that we have high integrity, high transparency, and the questions about how much, the carbon, what is the cost of a carbon credit, so that we have integrity around that process, including benefits that are accruing to communities, as well as the potential for, tax revenues for government. Thank you.
Senator Mundigi.
Asante Bwana Spika. Madam Waziri, ni asante kwa sababu unaamua miti ile imezeeka ikatwe, na katika Kenya tuko na majimbo 47. Na hawa majimbo 47 wale wako karibu na hiyo misitu ndio walipanda hiyo miti. Pia wale wako kupanda wengine walikuwa saidia wale wengine na chakula. Na ulifuatilia namna gani, kwa sababu tunajua kazi yako ni nzuri ya kuangalia wale watu walilipa pesa mapema ndio walipatiwa barua ya kwenda kukata ile miti. Kama Embu County kuna msitu inaitwa Erangi. Wale watu wamekuja pale ni watu wageni. Uliangalia namna gani hao watu waingie? Na kwa sababu wewe tunajua wewe unafanya kazi nzuri, kwa nini kuangalia kwanza hao watu watemwe nje warudishiwe pesa zao? Ndio kwa sababu hata wale watalipa na bei ya sasa watalipa pesa nzuri ya kuongezea uchumi wa Kenya, ndio uweze kupata watu wapya na kila county yenyewe isherekee na ifurahie, kwa sababu baadaye ndio watapanda miti. Kwa sababu tunajua kupanda miti ni kutoka county mpaka kule majimbo madogo. Hiyo ndio swali yangu Bwana Madam Waziri. Ya pili,
No, you can only, Honorable Senator, you can only ask one question. Honorable CS, proceed to respond to that question.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Senator. With the lift of the ban on logging, where we are starting from is to clear a backlog of sawmillers of different formations. When the ban was imposed in 2018, some sawmillers had actually been allocated parcels, plantations. They had paid, but they were caught up in the moratorium, and then they left their products in the forests. Some of them have rotten away, and it's the colossal losses that I was talking about that have been occasioned to sawmillers. Some of the sawmillers at the point of imposition of the ban in 2018 had paid, but had not cut them, so the trees are still standing, and at different stages of maturity. Some of them had not paid, but had been allocated. Some, they were at different levels. So that backlog is what we are dealing with, first of all, so that we clear with the sawmillers that had been engaged through the Kenya Forest at that time, but were caught up by the moratorium, before we embark on a new phase of 5,000 hectares of harvestation that will be done. Senator, you're raising a question of some new faces who are not part of the initial engagement with the Kenya Forest Service, if I got you right. Unasema kwamba kuna watu ambao hawakuwa na plantations kule Embu, Irangi Forest, na wamepewa permits ya kukata miti. I think being that it's very specific, the intention is to only allow for the sawmillers who had engaged with the Kenya Forest Service in 2018. So please, I have the Chief Conservator of Forests, Acting Chief Conservator of Forests here with me. Let's engage with the specifics, because if there is such an activity going on, then it's an irregular, because the sawmillers who need to be dealt with through the backlog process are known and should not be new faces, but only those who had engaged initially. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable CS. And thank you for honoring our invitation to come to respond to the question raised by senators. We have come to the end of the question time as far as the Honorable CS is concerned. And therefore, Honorable CS, you are free to go back to your ministry and do what you have to do. Thank you. Honorable Senators, we do have CS for Water, who is present for purposes of responding to question number 31 and 42. Both questions by Senator James Murango. Clerk, kindly usher in the Honorable CS so that we can take it from there. Let me take this opportunity to welcome the Honorable CS for Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, the Honorable Alice. Honorable Alice is not new to Parliament. She has taken time to hone her political skills in the walls of this Parliament, and therefore she's back home. Honorable CS, welcome back home. I will allow the Honorable Senator, Senator Murango, to ask question number 31.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the CS of Water for the good work she is doing. Then I'll go directly to question number 31. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on the status of construction of canals and drains in Mutidwand under the Mwea Irrigation Development Project, and also state why the construction has been delayed? And B of that question, what measures is the government taking to ensure the completion of the project to enable farmers to resume normal farming activities, and could the Cabinet Secretary provide a timeline for this?
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to attend to the question by Senator Fokirinyaga, Senator Murango, James Murango. Honorable Speaker, I also want to thank the Honorable House for continuous support in our work. This is my first time to appear before the plenary for Senate. I have appeared before the sister chamber before twice, and I'm glad to be here. Honorable Speaker, the question is that I provide an update on the status of construction of canals and drains in Mutithi Ward under Mwea Irrigation Development Project, and also state why the construction has delayed. Honorable Speaker, let me say that the contract for the construction works of the water conveyance canals, hydraulic structures, and drainage structures was signed between NIA, that is National Irrigation Authority, and Sogea Satom, a French company, on 26th of August 2016. The contract commenced on 9th of June 2017 and was expected to be completed on 9th of August 2020. During the financial year 2019-2020, the project was faced with inadequate budgetary allocation, which led to delay in making timely payments to the contractor. The contractor on 6th of February 2020 terminated the contract, citing delays in payment. At the time of termination, the project progress was at 43%. Honorable Speaker, the Ministry, through the National Irrigation Authority, with the concurrence of Japan International Cooperation Agency, that is JICA, who were the funding agency, procured 2 local contractors after the termination of the first contract to complete the balance of the works so that farmers could benefit from the project. The project has since progressed to an overall completion status of 70%. The delay in the completion of the project, therefore, would be attributed to further issues of land succession, that's the pending land succession or claims, disputes, cases arising therein, and yet to be determined either between the family members, through the court, or among themselves. That has been a challenge, not just in this particular project, but in many of our projects. Honorable Speaker, the total canals, the total length of the main canal is 2.4 kilometers. We have done 1.5 kilometers complete, but also there are other works, that is the branch canals, smaller canals or emerging branches to deliver the water to the farmers, totaling to 23 kilometers, which has been done. Thereafter, we will need to do structures, that is the structures between the canals to release the waters. Finally, the measures the government has taken to ensure completion of the project to enable farmers resume normal farming activities, and could I provide a timeline for this? Honorable Speaker, the project is structured in a way that normal farming activities are not interrupted. The government has allocated 2 billion shillings, that is a GOK component of 545 million Kenya shillings, and then a donor component that is from JICA, 1.4 billion in the financial year 2023-2024 for this particular scheme, the Mwea irrigation scheme, and with that, we will see the project to the end. The contractors have been instructed to increase the rate of progress of their work, or the rate of implementation, and adhere to strict timelines where the manager and the PS irrigation are monitoring at very close maybe approach in terms of even supervision. We have also held several meetings, including the last one on 11th of July, to ensure that we also respond to questions that are coming from the farmers. And the Honorable Senator, the owner of this question, was privileged to be part of the team that attended the last meeting, my permanent secretary, and the CEO, acting CEO, National Irrigation Authority, held at Mwea at the ground on 11th of July, and it was, and we appreciate the support from the Honorable Senator. Thank you.
Senator Morango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me again thank the CS for the good work she's doing. I would like a little bit of clarification, because when the president was there, the president promised 400 million, of which there was supposed to be 115 million, which was supposed to be given by the county government for the dam lining on the same scheme. The budget of the county government of the 115 million is already there. So I would like to ask the CS whether the 2 billion which has been given for this particular project, the 400 million which was promised by the president, is part of the 2 billion which has been budgeted for this financial year. Thank you.
Honorable CS.
Honorable Speaker, to the Honorable Senator, although we are aware of the presidential pronouncement regarding additional funding, we have not yet received that money, and it is not part of our budget, because I think at the time that the pronouncement was made, we were not able to factor it in our budget, but we are hopeful that during the supplementary, since it gets, when it is a pronouncement by the president, then it receives attention and priority in the ministry, and maybe what I can undertake is to follow it up. But also I want to confirm that due to austerity measure in the process, I have lost as a budget under irrigation of more than 1.3 billion shillings. So we are working with a very constrained budget, but we will definitely work on it. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the CS. And just to let you know, Chair, the Speaker, is that when we were together in National Assembly, I was the Chair Chailak, and she was my very able deputy. Now things have changed, the Chair, the Speaker. She's the CS, I'm the Senator. It's something good. Madam CS, Baringo County is 65% arid and semi-arid. And as leaders of Baringo, we've identified Lake Baringo, which is a freshwater lake, that we can be able to tap that water, take it upstream, and be able to irrigate a lot of area within Baringo North, Baringo South, and Yatei. And I wanted to know, because Madam CS, it is important for as your ministry to look at some of the very quick wins for some of the areas like our Baringo area, which is really dry. Do you have any plan, or rather, what are the plans you have to make use of that water of Lake Baringo for irrigation purposes and even consumption by the public in Baringo County?
Honorable CS.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it is true that Honorable Senator for Baringo, Honorable Cheptumo, was my chair, very able chair also, and we did do a lot of good work in the JRAC committee in the National Assembly, and I appreciate the direction of this question in terms of Lake Baringo and the waters in that body. We have studies and concept ready, and we are discussing with the different entities to farm at least a total of 56,000 acres of food crops. Maize being one of those that in that region would do very well, and of course other grains. So we do have that in under our consideration, but I cannot tell you right away that we have a concluded deal But we would hope that will be one of our very, very quick wins because the land is available and we can be able to use some of the water, not all the water. Of course, you know, we are under the international laws regarding management and use of water, but some water may be available for use, and we have earmarked about 56,000. The water we can use in total would cover irrigation for 56,000 acres.
Senator Kathure.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want really to appreciate the two CSEs who have shown up this morning to answer questions from the senators. And I've observed that they were former members of parliament, so they understand exactly why senators ask questions. So, CS Water, thank you for your performance so far in the ministry. And also your performance in the National Assembly when we served there for 2 terms was exemplary. You know, when I'm here, I'm representing Meru County and I want to be selfish to exactly ask issues concerning Meru. So, Madam CS, sometimes you might not have direct answers to what we ask, but it's good at least you capture what we are requesting, especially the several dams that are lined up in Meru. Some of the areas can get dams, others need even tapping the underground water or groundwater, which is so much from Bole constituency, Tigania West, Tigania East, Tigania, Gembe Central, and Gembe North. So besides the dams, Madam CS, what is the ministry doing to profile all that region, especially the arid and semi-arid zones of Meru, maybe to do water pans and boreholes, at least because those are fast to do, not the dams which need billions in this financial year. So if you don't have the question, maybe that can be canvassed, maybe somewhere else. But I want you to note that we are really following up that those projects, especially in my county. Thank you.
Honorable CS.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I would first say that so far I have been able to have meetings with the entire Embu County leadership and the Tharaka Nithi leadership, but I have not had the benefit or opportunity to have a meeting with the leadership of Meru County. But I want to invite the senator actually and ask him to possibly lead the team so that we can look at the larger, maybe broad approach of how to provide for water, including what dams should take priority, especially now that we are also having this discussion and PPP is gaining ground in terms of the interest we have created. The money that was going to pans and boreholes, Honorable Speaker, and I want to say to this House, is some of the monies that I lost during the austerity measures. We lost, first and foremost, we lost a budget of 5 billion. When we were doing this particular budget of this particular year, 2023-2024, again, I lost 1.4 billion, I think 1.5 billion. And I hope that is the last that I'll lose. And I hope to gain that during discussions with the Parliament at the supplementary stages. But may I say that we will consider work in Meru, and I know that we have ongoing projects, but specifically, I don't want to say which one, but I know like between Tharaka and Meru, we are proposing Doshi Dam that will benefit parts of Meru and parts of Tharaka. And that is a conversation that it's at a very high stage because it's one of the dams that we have released under the 33 dams that we have already called for expression of interest. Thank you.
Senator Gataya Mufaya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. May I sincerely thank the CS Water, Madam Harris, for having performed exemplary very well. Madam CS, you are aware recently we were with you in Tharaka Nithi, where we commissioned Chogoria water treatment plant with a very big capacity. And Chuka is also underway, which is not complete yet, and I hope your ministry is working on it. Madam CS, besides all these things, there is a challenge in connecting 30,000 connections in the next 5 years as we intend to go. So I'm seeking to know from your office or from your ministry whether is it possible to rehabilitate and infrastructure at Chuka, Chogoria, Mutonga, and Kibunga. Those are water points that have been neglected for decades. At the same time, Honorable CS, in the same breath, it's important for your ministry to consider also rehabilitating Mutonga raw water main and expand Kibunga treatment plant main to Rancha tank. These are already laid down structures that have been neglected for very many years. Because Honorable CS, once we have this water from Chogoria and Chuka, this water can be consumed all the way downstream to some parts of Harend and some other areas in Tharaka, especially Kibunga, Marimanti, Kadwana, and so many other places. Is it also possible, in the same breath, Honorable CS, to lay pipeline extension in Chogoria, Chuka, Kadwana, Kibunga, Mutonga, and the Gituma areas? Thank you, Honorable CS. And under this kind of arrangement, Honorable CS, if we make these things vibrant, we shall have addressed almost 75% of water shortage in those areas.
Honorable Senator Kinyua, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, in our standing orders, every person is supposed to address you. I don't know why he's addressing the Cabinet Secretary. He's supposed to address you.
I did not capture that, but I think she was directing his question to the CS. In the event that he addressed the chair as the Honorable CS, then he's out of order. But nevertheless, allow him to get away with that. Honorable CS, proceed to respond to the question.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. To answer the Honorable Senator for Tharaka, it is true we were with him like three weeks ago with His Excellency the President in Tharaka, and we were.
Honorable Senator, kindly take your seat. And allow the Honorable CS to respond to your question.
I'm corrected, Tharaka Nithi Senator. We were with you 3 weeks ago at an event that was presided over by His Excellency the President, and the occasion was to commission the Chogoria water and sewerage treatment, which is supposed to cover up to about 300,000 people in that area. So far, we have covered close to 140,000 people. And the intention, of course, to go up to 300,000. We did agree with the Governor Tharaka County that for purposes of reticulation, which, Honorable Speaker, this House is aware that reticulation, distribution of water, that is a service delivery element, is by the county government through the water service providers, but the governor undertook, as part of this project, to provide Kenya shillings 50 million, and His Excellency the President also said he will support the ministry with a further 50 million to cover ground for the last mile, and that would possibly cover the areas that the Honorable Senator has indicated in Chuka, Kathwana, Muchunga, and the rest. And since this is a supplementary question, I think it is good that we follow up with you. Then I can tell you further work, Honorable Speaker, that is set for that region. We also have ongoing Chuka water supply is ongoing. It is not complete, and I know that we had a discussion during that particular occasion where we said that we should look at urgent possibilities of having, is it Tunga Dam? There is a dam that we are proposing to augment the supply of water for Chuka itself, and therefore we did pick that as a priority project, and we will work with that in our plans. And therefore, the rehabilitation that you're talking about for Chogoria and Chuka is already ongoing. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Cheriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for finding it fit to appear before Parliament to respond to questions by members. Mr. Speaker, my question is with regards to county water service bodies. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, that this is a discussion that we've had as Senate, that in each of our 47 counties, the leading audit queries in the audit cycle, each financial years, are misappropriation of funds in the various water service bodies. You know, what used to be owned by the municipalities and have since been transferred to counties. County water service bodies, Mr. Speaker, play a crucial role in as far as fulfilling the last mile water connectivity that we promised in the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, which the Minister is fully aware of. And they play a critical role alongside the huge water projects that her ministry will do, either be they dams or any of those large interventions. The eventual and distributors of these resources, those that ensure that there is proper metering and the prudent management of those resources, the monies and the waters as well, are the county water service boards. And we are increasingly seeing a scenario where they are being mismanaged. You have situations where former governors are still active directors, even in some of those companies up to now. It is upon the national government, Schedule 4 of our Constitution, to develop policy that will ensure uniformity of practice across all the 47 counties in areas that are of national interest. Water is one such sector. So I'd wish to know from the Minister what plans she has in terms of reining in first on the mess that is in almost every water service agency presently. I think you can hardly find any that is not muddled right now with issues of corruption and misappropriation of funds, fights between the directors and the management and that kind of a thing. So it is something that warrants the attention of the Minister, and perhaps by way of a proposal either of regulations or legislation that come from her ministry to this House for them to be properly managed. What strategies has she put in place, and what is their plan as a ministry? Because the reason I ask that, Mr. Speaker, is if the Minister doesn't streamline this sector and bring order, then all these major projects that are contained in the plan and that she's working hard to deliver and fulfill will go to waste, because there'll not be an eventual connecting point between those major projects and the citizens. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I appreciate the question from the Majority Leader of the Senate, Honorable Aaron Cheriot. Honorable Speaker, the water service providers are or should be entirely within the governance structures in a way, or under the supervision and direct direction of the county governments. It is true we are supposed to be the ones helping with quality, assurance, the standards, so that the issues of governance that the Honorable Senator has referred to can be dealt with. The relationship between the national government, Honorable Senators, you are aware, and the county governments, and especially in the function of water service delivery, water, the whole issue around water is, I would say, it's love and don't love, or love and hate. I don't want to use the word hate because it may not be very friendly, but there is a relationship that is not always, it's complicated, not always very complementary to each other's efforts. And while the national government has the mandate to develop and manage huge bulk water resources as our mandate, there is still a case where the county governments are raising an issue and saying this is encroaching onto their mandate. I'm saying this as a background to be able to answer the question, the critical question that the Honorable Majority Leader has raised. And then, but really leading from the Constitution, under Article 43, it is the mandate of the national government to ensure access to clean, safe drinking water by the national government, including sanitation. And my ministry has those two under the State Department of Water and Sanitation. Of course, there are those others, health, and the rest of the Bill of Rights. Therefore, when we do the development of the bulk water resources, it is expected that simultaneously the county government would be planning for reticulation or distribution, the last mile case for that particular development. Honorable Speaker, that doesn't always happen. It is many times, and I think also the county governments, without really closing my eyes to the fact that they also don't have sufficient budget, the county governments then find themselves that a project is ready and they don't have money for distribution. So it is a case where we need to plan simultaneously, plan together, improve the intergovernmental relationship there, the working and linkages, so that we can be able to deliver to the people the service. The bottom line is that people want water in their homes, and they really don't care whether it is national government or the county government. And we promised, including last mile, as a government, to ensure that we support the county government. So to answer you, we have through WASLEB. WASLEB is doing quite a good job in terms of insisting and giving program timelines for the water service providers to convert into public utilities, public bodies, so that the county governments can be able to appoint directors. But that is where another problem may arise. These are not positions for cronyism. We have serious problems with our service providers, water service providers, cases of governance issues, cases of mismanagement, cases of inefficiency in delivery of the service. And we are therefore finding that we have non-revenue water, that is water unaccounted for, to the point one or two have gone beyond 50%. You produce, you develop water 100%, say you have 1 drum, 50% of that drum is, Honorable Speaker, not accounted for. It's either stolen, it is sold by cartels, or there is leakage, or the meters are not working. We have some programs right now, finally to answer to this question, that are addressing those issues, working with the partners. We have developed some programs to build capacity for the water service providers. But the direct mandate to manage, to ensure governance at that level is the county governors. And I believe we have made our case very strong. We believe some have started taking up the responsibility, and they are converting. The water service providers have started converting into public entities, because most of them, the assets that they have belong to either national government or public assets, one way or the other. So I don't think we can run away from that problem. And I believe we are a long way to go, but Honorable Speaker, we should be able to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you, CS. Let's have the last two supplementary questions, one from Delitu John Kinyua, Senator Laikipia.
Asanti Bwana Spika. Yangu ni kuuliza tu waziri, kwa sababu Bwana Spika, nchi yetu tuna baraka. Wakati mwingi tunapata mvua, mpaka mvua ya mafuriko Bwana Spika. Unapata maji yote ya mvua yanatiririka, yote yanaenda katika bahari zetu Bwana Spika. Alafu hata wakati huo kuna ile mvua Bwana Spika, unasikia sehemu nyingi Wakenya wakisema serikali saidia kwa sababu mifugo imebebwa, kuku, kila kitu imebebwa na maji Bwana Spika. Lakini baada ya mwezi mmoja Bwana Spika, tena unapata kiangazi. Watu hawana maji, ilhali maji yote Bwana Spika ilitiririka ama iliteremka yote ikaenda katika maziwa ama katika bahari zetu Bwana Spika. Sijui ni mipango gani waziri alio nayo Bwana Spika ya kuweza kuhifadhi haya maji yasiwe yote yanateremka yanaenda katika bahari zetu Bwana Spika. Na wakati huo huo Bwana Spika, ni mpango upi wizara walio nayo Bwana Spika, ukienda katika mabawa yetu yote imejaa mchanga Bwana Spika, ni hatua zipi ambazo ama ni mikakati ipi Bwana Spika walio nayo kwanza kuhifadhi maji alafu kuondoa zile mabawa yetu, kuondoa mchanga Bwana Spika?
Madam CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The Senator for Laikipia's concern is what we are doing about water harvesting, particularly giving attention to the flooding and the loss of rainwater when we get heavy rains, considering that we are a water-scarce country. Honorable Speaker, we have a huge program of building 100 mega dams, bulk water storage. That program is targeted at various rivers within our country and varies. Majority of the havoc that is experienced in this country is along some of our huge rivers. And therefore, the water that we expect to hold through the 100 dams that we plan to build, and we have made expressions of interest, we have done the invitation of 33 mega dams under the PPP. Honorable Speaker, that process is underway. We expect within the next 6 months, it will conclude with good results of people who have expressed interest, having brought acceptable project development proposals. And there is good interest, I can confirm, to the House and to the country. We also are building some other rivers. We have canals and we have dikes that we replace to deal with that. Overall, Kenya did not plan for water management. And therefore, the infrastructure that we need is huge to deal with the challenge that the Honorable Senator is raising. I need huge funding to be able to possibly start undertaking to this House that we will deal with the floods once and for all. But we have in place a water harvesting and storage strategy that we have already developed. So the strategy then is followed by funding, and we are working on that. I think maybe that is what, and in Laikipia, one of the dams that we intend to build is the one in Nanyuki. I have been told, and of course, Malewa and Pesi and Malewa. I know Malewa is down to a different county, but Pesi and Kahorora are within Laikipia and Nanyuki area. Thank you.
Thank you. The last supplementary question and question number 031, Senator Wajir Abbas Sheikh Mohammed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I want to thank the CS for the good response actually she's giving. Honorable CS, I think the county I come from, Wajir, has 56,000 square kilometers, and it is a landmass, and it is a landlocked area. There is no river that flows. There are no temporary streams that flow. but the land is endowed with, underground water. However, because of the droughts that has become so frequent, water is now becoming very scarce. I know many of my colleagues and MPs are rushing every day to your office, but however, I think we have upside-down priorities. For one, what Wajir now needs is actually a very serious water investment. In the countries like Egypt and all those places where it never rains, they never realize any water scarcity. They depend on the River Nile, and we have similar rivers that flows within the neighborhood of Wajir. We can have some water from Tana River, we can have water from Sosiro, we can have water from Dawa, all these places. Therefore, but I think I don't know what your ministry has as a master plan. I'm aware that in 2013, 2017, up to 2022, there was a major dam that was supposed to be constructed in a place called Butte. Butte is actually one of the high potential areas at the slopes of, the end, towards the end of, or the start of the Ethiopian highlands. But that business, that dam has not been constructed up to now. We are wondering what's happening. It will have been one of our best, investments that will be able to do at least irrigation and water for people use and livestock. One other thing I'm asking is actually, Madam Speaker, how sustainable is PPP business in water? Because the investors, any investor also wants to have a quick return for any investment. So how will PPP work for water? That's actually the question I want to know from you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry, Madam CS.
Madam CS.
Thank you. The Honorable Senator for Wajir. Thank you for the question, Honorable Speaker. Maybe the answer to that particular question is that it is true there are no rivers in Garissa, in Wajir, but we have underground water. We have quite a good amount of water in the aquifers. At the moment, we have a program that we are doing our investigative survey, data collection, and assessment of the amount of water within maybe the combined or the shared aquifer between Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. We have an aquifer covering that region, and we have funding, and the project has already commenced. We have a 20 billion funding to cover Wajir, Garissa, Turkana, Madera, and Marsabit, where the main effort is to do our analysis and find out how much water we have in the aquifers and how much can be available to be used by the three countries. Because being an aquifer, it is a shared water resource, and therefore one country may not proceed to exploit that alone without cooperation with the other countries. And then you ask the question on Dana River clusters, the dams. Our study on this particular river is complete. Again, we do the work and look for budget. Honorable Speaker, we can be able to farm about 20,000 acres. The study is ready, and we will be moving forward with seeking for resources for this particular project, and it will turn that area into a different place. Of course, we have additional work that is planned for boreholes and water pans as the other alternative. The boreholes become a big challenge in that area. Sometimes to reach the borehole, and when you reach the borehole, then maybe the salt levels, is a challenge. But also that there are cases where we get a borehole done for community, and some cartels take over the water resource or the water borehole, and they run as individuals. So I think, Honorable Speaker, that requires also the community effort and leadership support, because when we have a borehole that is taken over by 1 or 2 people and they are guarding it with arms, insecurity issues arise. I'm not saying that is happening in his particular area, but generally that is a challenge for Marsabit, Mandela, Garissa, and Wajir.
Okay, very well. Let's now go to the next question. What is it, Senator Abbas? And actually, you have been given a very comprehensive answer, like she had all the information.
One question. The question for the Butte Dam, which has taken almost now 15 years to start. What is the position?
I believe Butte Dam is in the first is in the first lot of the expression of interest that we have taken up among the 33 dams that we have called for expression of interest under PPP. I want to say that we don't really have funding for big dams because of the physical space that we have. Including smaller dams, we are working with a very constrained budget, and that's why as a country we have appreciated and we think the space and opportunity for public-private investment is here and now. So we believe we'll be able to do them through PPPs.
Thank you. Let's go to question number 042. Senator for Kirinyaga County. Or you are satisfied with your problems? I can see. As the question number 42, 042.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am satisfied with the first question that I asked. And in fact, what the CS said is true that we were with the PS for irrigation, Kemodo and also Engineer Masi and Ambund, and they did a wonderful job. We were there for a whole day. My second question is for the CS, maybe to explain why the Kakuyuini irrigation water project that was meant to earn more than 500 acres under activation to my irrigation scheme in Wamumu and Kirinyaga County, why it has taken too long to implement. And on the same, could the Cabinet Secretary appraise the Senate on the status of its implementation and indicate whether any funds have been allocated to the project in the financial year 2023-2024? And lastly, on the same question, is the CS to provide a tentative commencement and completion timelines for the project so that the over 100 intended beneficiaries can benefit, and the President's stated intention to increase land under irrigation and improve food security through increased rice production to make sure the increased rice production is achieved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Madam CS.
Honorable Speaker, the question on Gakuyuni irrigation water project that was meant to add more than 500 acres under cultivation to Mwea irrigation scheme in Wamumu ward, Kirinyaga County, why it has taken long to implement. Honorable Speaker, the ministry through NIA, that is the National Irrigation Authority, is mandated to increase area under irrigation agriculture. A request was made by farmers at Gakuyuni water project on 20th of August 2020 to have their farmlands provided with water for irrigation infrastructure for that purpose and benefit the farmers. In their request, the farmers highlighted that construction of canals and provision of water control structures such as gates would help convey and control distribution of water Survey was carried out to confirm the feasibility of the project. The potential was found to be 1,250 acres as the command area extended beyond the boundaries of Gakuyuni. As a result, for inclusivity of these farmers, the project was renamed as Marurumo Irrigation Expansion. Design for the project was accomplished, paving way for the construction works which commenced on 6th of April 2022. The Wayleaf acquisition process by farmers and NIA and ongoing farming activities slowed the progress because you have to wait maybe for the harvest. The project is scheduled to be completed, however, in November 2023. There was a slow start because of those challenges, but it is ongoing. Then could the Cabinet Secretary appraise the Senate on the status of its implementation and whether any funds have been allocated this financial year? The Honorable Speaker, the overall status of the implementation of the project is at 88%, and I have summarized there and given the data for that particular completion status, saying that at Marurumo expansion area, 109.88 work done. That is the expansion, you know, the canals that we, these are canals, no? Yes, 109, 88 are done, and then below you can see we have done 6. We still have a balance of 24. In total, canals and drains are expected to occupy about 40 kilometers, and so far we have 88 out of 109. Honorable Speaker, no, we are at 88% completion, and the totals that we have done are listed there. For padding work is listed, that is 21, 24, and 10. The funds for implementation of the project have been factored in this financial year. The value of the remaining work is 17.8 million. The total project cost is about 100 million Kenya shillings, and at 88%. Finally, I have been asked to provide a tentative commencement and completion timeline. I think I've just gone ahead so that the 1,000 extended beneficiaries can benefit, and the President's stated intention to increase land under irrigation in the general area to improve food production or food security, where we hope to cover a total of 35,000 acres of rice farming. And so far we are at around 30,000 acres, producing around 130,000 cubic tons of rice. Honorable Speaker, the work will be completed on 30th of November. That is our target date. We intend to achieve that, and the project started 16th of April 2022. So I think we are basically within the timelines, because if we started at on 6th of April and now we are telling this House, and I confirm that we shall work with this timeline, Honorable Speaker, to the Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Murango, do you have any supplementary question?
Mr. Speaker, I will just request maybe for the hand copy of the reply from the Cabinet Secretary for my filing. Maybe for the...
You want some evidence?
Yes, I need some evidence.
Yeah, fine.
Yes.
If that is your supplementary question, then CS maybe can...
However, Mr. Speaker, I'm contented with the answer given. And again, I want to thank the CS for water and also the office, I can see the PS there, together the engineers, because I can say that when we had the last visit that we had in Kirinyaga on the same Moi irrigation scheme, the team was dedicated from 8 o'clock to 6. And we covered a lot of ground on the same. We met the farmers. We had, even we had some time to have some rice. And it was a good experience, and the people of Kirinyaga are really happy about that. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the CS office and the whole of our team for our work well done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Madam CS, you have a comment on that?
I cannot, just on the request for a copy, we have provided that to the director or the person who was communicating with my office, but if it has not reached the Senate, we will ensure that a soft copy is sent as soon as I leave the office.
You get
Senate.
a copy from
Yes.
the secretary.
Yes.
You have the copy already, Madam CS. Even in the next 2 minutes, he can get his copy. Then let's get a supplementary question from Isiolo Senator and Andulo Fatuma.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to ask a general question from the CS. And I want to congratulate her because this is the first time we have interacted since she was appointed. Mr. Speaker, there is a major problem, especially in the areas where Mount Kenya is and the people who are living downstream, where the rich people are actually blocking the flow of the water from upstream to downstream. I don't know whether that has been brought to the attention of the CS to see how she can be able to unlock the water that is actually blocked by the rich men and or business people in Mount Kenya area, so that we can have enough water, especially if I may speak for Isiolo County. And I know, Mr. Speaker, you are smiling. I'm sure some of your area is also suffering from the same problem. I thank you.
Did you say I'm smiling, Senator Nduro? All the CS? Because you must be having very sharp eyes from where you are.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, maybe according to me, you are happy with the issue I've raised, now that you are on the other side. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy because you know all that belt. You know, the majority leader has interrupted my response to you, so let that go. Let us get the response from the CS.
It is possible, Honorable Speaker, that some water extractions are illegal because ordinarily Water Resource Authority is supposed to allow for extraction, and they regulate in the permit that is given, they regulate the amount of water you can extract. But sometimes we are having maybe the Honorable Senator is referring them to rich men. I hope that they are also rich men and women. But there are people who are farming without sometimes the knowledge in terms of extracting the water. And those are illegal extractors. And we are working hard. We have constrained human resource because sometimes you require our officers to visit the river, either downstream or upstream, wherever the activities are. And sometimes even when we disconnect, because we disrupt by disconnection, you also find that again, after we leave, the surveillance, you know, we don't have our own enforcement in terms of police, but we rely on the same police. The surveillance become very tedious. And I want to say that we will possibly, the Honorable Senator could give me specific rivers so that we can address specific area with the specific results expected. And we will definitely want to know who are those who are extracting and ensuring that the entire river is dry, for example, because the control should be there of how much you can extract in total in terms of the river flow. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CS. Senator Khalil Joyce.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Allow me to congratulate Madam CS for the good work that she's doing in the ministry. I know it's the first time that I'm also interacting with her since she has been appointed, but I've been watching her movements across the country, and the issue that is also trying to solve the issues of water across the country. Honorable Speaker, allow me also to thank Madam CS and the ministry for a project that has stalled for some years, around 7 years. That is the Poster Dam project that is covering 3 counties, that is Kericho, Bomet, and Nakuru County. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that I must thank the ministry for giving the project priority in terms of allocations, where right now, Honorable Speaker, I know there is something good that is taking place. And the residents of those counties have really been waiting for this project, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I know Madam Chair is a hard-working CS. We've been able to work with her when she was a women representative. And we had a movement by the name Inua Mama, where we moved across the country. And one of the main agendas that she used to talk when she was a chair was that she was going...
I beg your pardon. Did you say the CS was women led?
Yes, she was a member of parliament, Honorable Speaker. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, when she was a member of parliament, we had appointed her as our chair for the Inua Mama movement, which was supporting the government by then.
She's now...
protect me, Honorable Speaker.
I
from
think...
the senator from Baringo.
Let us hear from him what is his point of order.
Okay.
Chair, you know I normally don't interrupt, but I thought she was right by saying she was the women rep herself that time. And the CS was a member of parliament. Does she deny also she was not a women rep?
Are you trying to prove that I did not hear properly?
Yeah. I think I was right.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yeah, you know, they normally say the Speaker doesn't have eyes nor ears, but you caught me clearly, Honorable Speaker. Indeed, Madam CS was a member of parliament, and having been my chair of Inua Mama, we crisscrossed this country and promising the Kenyans that we were going to handle the issues that were affecting majorly the women. And that is water, Honorable Speaker. We didn't even knew that he was going to handle that docket. But I can say, Madam Honorable Speaker, that indeed she's up to the task. And I want to say that there are a number of challenges that the Kenyans are facing because of the droughts, because of the forest degradation, and a number of them. And I want to challenge Madam CS that as the Environment Ministry is also fighting in terms of doing the afforestation. I would challenge Madam Speaker, Honorable Speaker, Madam CS, that he also goes ahead, because I know the women reps have also been supplying water tanks to various schools. There are a number of schools that they have the water tanks, they don't have the cutters. I would request that the ministry, in conjunction with the Ministry of Environment, assist a number of schools so that at least they can do the water harvesting for the schools to be able to even assist for the water to be used by the students or the pupils in terms of even handling the issues of environment and even the issues of water usages in schools, Honorable Speaker. Otherwise, I just wanted to stand and appreciate her for the good work that she's doing, and also urge the minister to do that collection of the waters in schools and to assist us in actualizing the Poster Dam water project. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Madam CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to appreciate the Honorable Joyce Koriu. Yes, we did a lot of work with the Honorable member, the previous term, and I believe so therefore my work, I think the question is to ensure that my work is also looking at the issue of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, because during most of our meetings, there were water supplies, water tanks that we supplied during the program that was called Inua Mama. I want to confirm to the honorable member, water harvesting and storage being one of our our mandates, we are supplying, we have funds being available, we are supplying through the 9 agencies. At different times, different schools, we are supplying water tanks. And there are also instances where we actually build or construct the still water tanks depending on the need. So yes, we need to increase our efforts so that possibly the number, and I believe every school, Honorable Speaker, should have a certain minimum number of water storage and good harvesting roof for purposes of some water. And those are programs that we can do together even with the constituency development fund in terms of water for schools. And I believe that we will increase our numbers because the demands, according to the population demand increase, also is rising. I appreciate the good commendation the Honorable Senator has given.
Okay. Thank you, Madam CS. Let's get the last supplementary question from the Senator Mohamed Chute, Marsabit County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam CS, let me also congratulate you for coming here today, and also similarly congratulate you for coming to Marsabit. You came to Marsabit some months back. I know you got some issues there, banditry issue. I'm sorry about that. It was very scary. Madam, I got a phone call from Marsabit a few minutes ago. And the questions people in Marsabit are asking, when you came to Marsabit, you promised to come and open Bakuli, and the date was supposed to be on the 13th of June, 2023. And now, today is 2nd August, 2023. Madam CS, you came before us one time. We had CS Miano, who came before us also, and recently CS for Health. And your performance, the two of you, is excellent performance. I don't know who is going to take position 1, 2, or 3, but that one is subject to discussion for another day. But I really congratulate you. You are making us proud. But then, this question for Marsabit, can you please give us a tentative day, consult with your people so that the people in Marsabit are watching. I want them to be happy. I know, you know, Marsabit, we have issues of water shortages. And the biggest problem is the water line, the piping. Please address the piping issue. And once again, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The Honorable Senator, yes, it is true I was in Marsabit. The experience was fairly scary because I was evacuated from the Marsabit forest by a platoon of, of GSU or men in uniform. And I later learned that some resident, one of those who were involved in that particular incident, wasn't targeted. It's good that I say. The attack was not targeted at me, but of course I could have been caught within that crossfire. But I was evacuated. I went down the vehicle, and it wasn't very nice. That was a close experience with the fire being exchanged. But and somebody died, which is unfortunate. But those are the kind of things that we are saying we need to eliminate, because no one should lose their lives. I did promise that I would be coming back. And this particular Bakuli Dam basically is at 95% complete. There was a small issue of the wayleaf within town because of encroachment. And I believe the Honorable Senator, you know that. I didn't ask, as I was coming here, because this is a supplementary question, I will get my CEO, Tana Water Services, because they are the ones doing that project, to let me know, together with the Northern Water Development Works. I will find out whether that small issue is over. But I have presented this particular project to the Office of the President to see whether the President himself would be able to find time and put it in his schedule to have this particular project opened by the President so that we can benefit from his visit, and particularly so that he can help us pick the issue of Badassa Dam that is also in the pipeline. So maybe that is why I haven't come. Either way, once that is cleared, we shall be coming to Marsabit. Thank you very much.
So, Madam CS, let's now get this last one from Senator Bungoma.
Thank you. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa nafasi hii na vile vile kumshukuru waziri kwa kazi ambayo unafanya na kudhihirisha wa Kenya kwamba kando na kuwa mwanasiasa, mwanamke pia na uwezo wa kufanya kazi kando na kanuni za kijinsia zilizowekwa na tamaduni zetu. Swali langu Mheshimiwa Waziri, tumeona miradi mingi ya maendeleo ya maji katika kaunti mbalimbali za humu nchini. Kule Bungoma tuna mradi wa maji kule Mlima Elgon, nchi za kigeni, ambao tunashukuru unaenda kuchangia pakubwa kwa wakazi wa mji wa Bungoma na kaunti nzima kupata maji hadi kaunti ya Busia. Langu ni je, katika mustakabali wa mipangilio ya serikali, ni mradi upi mwingine wa kitaifa ambao umeratibiwa katika bajeti ambao unaenda kunufaisha watu wa Bungoma, ambao tunanufaisha watu wa Kakamega ambao ni majirani zetu, ili watu wanapomwagia heko hata sisi tusipitwe katika miradi yako ya maendeleo ya maji. Anaelewa fika kwamba tumekuwa tunajadiliana nawe kupitia vyombo mbalimbali, na baadaye najua tutaendelea kuzungumza, lakini kwa sababu wanasikiza kutoka kule nyanjani, itakuwa tu vyema kutaja kwa kifupi ni mradi upi ambao tunaenda kupata, kwa sababu walikuwa wanatazamia kwamba katika mipangilio yako maji ya Nabuyole yataweza kutumiwa kuunda bwawa ambalo litatupa maji katika maeneo bunge zaidi ya 8. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kutaraji kwa moyo mkunjufu jibu la Mheshimiwa Waziri. Asante.
Mheshimiwa Waziri.
I will try. First, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the question. Maybe I could first tell you that we have a project worth 4.4 billion shillings for irrigation. Location is Kuyua, Lunyu, Tongareni, Webuye, Bungoma County. We have water source at Livazoia, and this particular project is around that. We are rethinking of how to improve and expand the irrigation scheme around that area using gravity flow. And so I want to tell you that we are at a very advanced stage. The intake requires a new chamber, I think, 4-head works, intake chamber, conveyance pipelines. There is a lot of work that we have planned for that. This feasibility study is complete, and so that is for purposes of irrigation. But we also have, I don't know which project you are referring to, but we have a Gororo water project. Kenya and the Nile Basin countries are involved in that, and it is one of the projects, major projects in Western Kenya, going for about 8 billion shillings. But we also have Bungoma, Kakamega water supply for the 2 counties that was actually secured. A contract was, not a full contract, but an award was granted, but for purposes of EPCF, engineering, construction, and funding, engineering, procurement, construction, and funding. But you know where we are in terms of physical space, so it went slow. We are trying to see how to revive that particular project to supply water in Bungoma and Kakamega, and I think it will be, if I'm not wrong, it will be our answer to some of the challenges there. For Vihiga, you know, I went to Vihiga the other day. The head of state was a guest, and he launched Vihiga Water Supply, which is a project of about 2 billion Kenya shillings, and he did promise additional, is it three or about 300 million Kenya shillings to assist Vihiga County with the distribution last mile. So I believe I can give you details later if you need more details. So that project, we have not killed that project for both counties, Bungoma and Kakamega, and we are working to see whether it will be under EPCF, very concessionary terms, or PPP. And I believe we will be moving it forward.
Thank you, Madam CS. And that comes to the head of the 2 questions session. And we want to thank you for availing yourself to respond to the questions raised by the Murang'a Senator, James Murango. And also to appreciate that you are able to answer questions, supplementary questions, which you are not prepared to come and answer. So that shows you are not the type of CSAs. The president yesterday mentioned that some do not understand their dockets. So I want to inform the president from the chair that the CA's water is informed. She understands the docket well. Now that I came to the seat here, the issues of Meru, I'll be able to reach to you so that we agree on when we come with my team. So thank you, Madam CS, and all the best as you serve Kenyans.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind remarks, and the aid was good. Thank you, Asanteni Sana. Thank you, Honorable Senators. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the time and space. Thank you.
The other question was to be replied by the CS. Public service, gender and affirmative action. The CS wrote a letter, she's not available today, so that matter will be rescheduled. The SBC will be able to allocate her some time, maybe when she will appear. But I will caution her not to be writing letters to the Senate during the last minute after the business is scheduled. So that is done. Therefore, now we go to the next order.
Order number 8, motion, integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya.
Yes, Senator William Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move this motion, but in an amended form, pursuant to Standing Order 62, and you will be able to realize the amendments, Chair, as I read the motion. Mr. Speaker, I move the motion that are aware that Kenya is multi-ethnic country with a rich diversity of culture and language and traditions. Further aware that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities face significant social, economic, and political challenges, including discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Acknowledging that Article 10, Subarticle 2B, Article 21, Subarticle 3, Article 27, 58, 91, Subarticle 1E, Article 10, Article 174E, 177(1)C, Article 204, Subarticle 3B, Article 216, Subarticle 4, and the fifth schedule to the Constitution of Kenya obligates the state to promote and protect the welfare of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities. Appreciating that the government has put in place policies, legal and institutional framework, including affirmative action programs to address the needs of other special interest groups, namely children, persons with disabilities, youth, women, and the elderly, concerned that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities remain largely unaddressed through similar interventions due to lack of an existing national policy and legislative framework. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, the National Gender and Equality Commission, and the Directorate of National Cohesion and Values in the Office of the President, and any other relevant state department, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, 1, initiate measures to identify and address the specific needs and challenges faced by the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. 2, develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a motion that is intended to bring about integration and inclusion of the minorities and marginalized communities, Mr. Speaker, in our country. Our 2010 Constitution, Mr. Speaker, that is under Chapter 4 on Bill of Rights, recognizes and protects human rights and fundamental freedoms for every Kenyan. And if you read Article 20, Sub-Article 2, Mr. Speaker, every Kenyan, irrespective of his or her ethnic background, status, religion, shall enjoy the rights and fundamental freedoms to the greatest extent consistent with the nature of that right and fundamental freedoms. And Mr. Speaker, Article 21, Sub-Article 3, what I'm doing, Mr. Speaker, is just to show the House the constitutional provisions that I will be relying even as I move this motion. Mr. Speaker, Article 21, Sub-Article 3 recognizes several vulnerable groups in our society whose rights should be recognized and protected. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about a small section of our society, that is the women, the elderly members of our society, persons with disability, children, youth. But this motion, Mr. Speaker, relates to members of minority and marginalized communities in our country. Mr. Speaker, as I said, Article 21, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution obligates the state organs to address the needs of the vulnerable groups by coming up with legislative policies and other measures to achieve realization of the rights of those groups. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution, in very clear and mandatory terms, by usage of the word shall, places that responsibility in the state and all the state organs. Mr. Speaker, it is my humble submission to this House that the state has, to a very large extent, Mr. Speaker, placed the policies, legal, and institutional framework, affirmative action programs to address the needs of the children, women, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. To that extent, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the House the state has done very well in coming up with those legislative and affirmative action. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we have the Youth and Enterprises Fund. That is why we have the Women Enterprises Fund, the cash transfers for the elderly, and other social assistance programs, Mr. Speaker, catering for the orphans, vulnerable children, and so on. And Mr. Speaker, the effects of this affirmative action for these vulnerable groups I've talked about is that these groups now have significantly benefited from these affirmative actions by both national and the county government. These interventions has enabled the groups to attain inclusivity, creating opportunities, and ensuring their active participation in various aspects of society. Mr. Speaker, that is really the spirit of our Constitution 2010, that irrespective of your status, as much as you may be vulnerable, you don't have resources. You are minorities, minority in a particular situation. The Constitution requires that the government, the state, should be able to put in place measures and affirmative action to mainstream those groups now in all aspects of society. Mr. Speaker, the sad story is that whereas the state has, to a large extent, addressed the needs of the interests of the vulnerable groups I've mentioned, as the children, the women, the elderly, the people with disabilities, and so on. The state, Mr. Speaker, and I submit that they has completely ignored, refused, and or neglected to address the needs of the marginalized and minorities as required under Article 21, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the state has even made it worse by not implementing Article 56 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, allow me to refer to that particular article of the Constitution so that the House really appreciates what I'm saying. Mr. Speaker, Article 56 of the Constitution says, the state shall, again, Mr. Speaker, in mandatory terms, by usage of the word shall, put in place affirmative action programs designed to ensure that minorities and marginalized groups, A, participate and are represented in governance and other spheres of life, are provided special opportunities in education and economic fields, are provided special opportunities for access to employment, develop their culture, values, and, Mr. Speaker, have reasonable access to water, health, services, and infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, that is the sad situation we face in the country today. Whereas the vulnerable groups identified in Article 21, Sub-Article 3, some has been taken care of. These minorities and marginalized groups, Mr. Speaker, have not been taken into account. But, Mr. Speaker, maybe it is important for the country and for this House to understand the definition of marginalized. Mr. Speaker, I take the House to Article 260. Article 260, Mr. Speaker. And I want to define marginalized groups as defined by the Constitution. A community that, because of its relatively small population or for any other reason, has been unable to fully participate in the integrated social and economic life of Kenya as a whole. A traditional community that, out of a need or desire to preserve its unique culture and identity from assimilation, has remained outside the integrated socio-economic life of Kenya as a whole. Further definition, an indigenous community that has retained and maintained a traditional lifestyle or livelihood based on a hunter or gathering economy. And finally, Mr. Speaker, pastoral persons and communities where they are nomadic and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking about an imaginary group of people in the country. I'm talking of a group of people recognized in our Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want the country to know that we have a total of 3,573,749 Kenyans who fall under that category, Mr. Speaker, defined in Article 260. That is, Mr. Speaker, 9.3% of our population. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, that we have ignored the well-being of 9.3% of our population in not mainstreaming them in participating and integrating them with the other people? Mr. Speaker, there are 79 minorities in our country, spread across 26 counties in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, Baringo is one of them, where I represent, where you have the El Chamus, a small community in some 2 wards in Baringo. You have the Kikuyu community in Lama Ravine in 1 or 2 wards. We have the Nubians, a very small population. We have the Kisis, we have the Somalis, and so on. I'm just referring to my county. But Mr. Speaker, Taita Taveta, represented by my brother Munkatana here, Tana River, Taita Taveta, Wachia, Kilifi, Mombasa, Migori. I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker, 27 counties with that situation of minorities, totaling 3,573,000 and so on. And so, Mr. Speaker, what is before the House today is a national issue. And Mr. Speaker, if you read 174 of the Constitution, allow me to take the House there, Mr. Speaker, because I want to show that the framers of the Constitution, which I had the chance of being one, Mr. Speaker, because at the time I was the Assistant Minister of Justice. 174, Mr. Speaker, talks about the objectives of devolution. Let me take the House there. Article 174, objects of devolution. That is 174E. The objects of the devolution of governments are, you talk of A, B, C, D, but when you go to E, Mr. Speaker, is to protect and promote the interests and rights of minorities and marginalized communities. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm not just addressing the responsibility of the national government. I'm addressing also the responsibility of the county governments. Because the whole reason, one of the reasons why we went for devolution is also to address that. Again, Mr. Speaker, I don't think the counties are also doing very well in terms of mainstreaming and integrating the minorities in their day-to-day functions. Mr. Speaker, I've talked about that Article 56, which we have not been able to implement by the state has not been able to implement. Mr. Speaker, the consequences of not actualizing the provisions of Article 56, the consequences of not coming up with programs and affirmative action under Article 21, sub-Article 3, the consequences, Mr. Speaker, of the county governments not implementing even that provision of the objectivity of devolution under 174 is that these minorities have not been able to participate represented in governments, national and county governments. They have not been able to access employment. They have been ignored. They have been neglected. And Mr. Speaker, if you read those items under Article 56, are really clear as to the areas where we have been able to fail. So, Mr. Speaker, the foundation of this motion is premised upon the fact that we have for a very long time ignored, excluded the minorities and the marginalized communities in our country. 27 senators in this House, Mr. Speaker, were voted in by those minorities. It is only prudent, Mr. Speaker, that those of us in this House today who benefited, who were voted in by those minorities, Mr. Speaker, should be able to compel, through a resolution of this House, Mr. Speaker, the state and the county governments, Mr. Speaker, to do exactly what we are seeking in this motion. And what are we seeking, Mr. Speaker, in this motion? We are seeking that the county, the state, and the county governments, Mr. Speaker, should initiate measures to identify and address the specific needs and challenges faced by ethnic minorities in our country. Mr. Speaker, it is important to identify those needs and address them. 2, develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of these minorities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the intention and the constitutional provisions is intended to mainstream, to allow the minorities to be part and parcel of our development. Mr. Speaker, we talk of a united country, a country that is united by values of a united nation where we belong to this country, served by the same government, Mr. Speaker, served by the same constitution. It is wrong. And I think the time, Mr. Speaker, has come for this House to stand firm, pass this motion. And Mr. Speaker, when the time comes for us now as a House to pass the appropriate legislation, Mr. Speaker, I am sure that my colleagues will be able to stand firm and pass the laws that will make those minorities in our place, those in El Chamus, in Baringo County, the Kikuyu community in Baringo, in Lamba Ravine, the Nubians in Mokotio, and in Kabarnet, and in Marigat, they should be part and parcel of that community, Mr. Speaker. The Pokot Nation, which is in Tiatei constituency, which is in Baringo County, Mr. Speaker, these are Kenyans who will feel recognized. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, for all the other counties, I don't want to mention them because, Mr. Speaker, I don't have the time. But as I said before, this is a national conversation we need to engage in. It's a national challenge we need to deal with so that, Mr. Speaker, those marginalized in our communities will feel part and parcel of this country, part and parcel of the development that we enjoy in our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to stop there and plead with my colleagues that let us debate this motion and pass it. Mr. Speaker, I move, and I want to request my learned junior, Senator Mungatana, to second this motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bwana Spika, napenda kuchukua nafasi hii kwanza kumpa kongole Mheshimiwa wa Baringo William Cheptumo ambaye alimaliza mwaka mmoja mbele yangu tukiwa huko shuleni tukisomea sheria. Nampongeza kwa kuleta hoja hii hapa bungeni la Senate. Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, ukweli wa mambo ni kwamba tangu uhuru ulipoanza tumekuwa na ugandamizaji wa kabila ndogo ndogo katika mfumo wa kisiasa na kiuchumi hapa nchini kwetu Kenya. Bwana Spika, historia inatuonyesha ya kwamba mkoloni alipokuwa anatawala Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania na nchi hii, sehemu hii yote, alichagua namna ya kuwatawala watu wengi pale kwa kuwapatia nafasi za ofisi kubwa kubwa wale ambao waliamua kufanya kazi na mkoloni. Na kwa sababu ya hivyo, Bwana Spika, ilipatikana kwamba wakati mkoloni yuko pale mamlakani, kulikuwa Waafrika wengine wachache ambao walichaguliwa kuwa machifu wakubwa ambao walishirikiana na mkoloni kugandamiza wale Waafrika wengine, na wao wakapata nafasi kujiendeleza kiuchumi na kinafasi za kiserikali. Bwana Spika, Rais wa Kenya wa kwanza Jomo Kenyatta alipochukua mamlaka hakubadilisha mwelekeo huo. Ndio maana wengine walisema ya kwamba mzungu aliondoka, mzungu mweupe aliondoka, lakini mzungu mweusi alikuja. Manake mambo mengi hayakubadilishwa. Kabila ndogo ndogo ziliendelea kugandamizwa, Mheshimiwa, na ndio maana hoja hii ni muhimu leo tuizungumze. Sisi ambao tunatoka kwa kabila ndogo ndogo lazima tuyaseme haya ili tuelewane ya kwamba Kenya hii tuko na tunaishi na tuko hapa, tuondoke. Bwana Spika, hawakugeuza haya, waliendelea hivyo hivyo. Na Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, ugandamizaji huu ulienda ukaelekezwa kwamba nafasi za kiserikali kwa watu wa Tana River miaka ya Jomo Kenyatta ilikuwa ni chache. Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, iliendelezwa tu kwamba sehemu zile za watu wengi ndio walipata nafasi. Vile vile mkoloni alikuwa anafanya, ndivyo rais wa kwanza alifanya. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia katika masomo ya watu ambao wamesoma haya mambo university, utaona rais wa pili pia alifuata nyayo. Yeye mwenyewe alisema mimi nitafuata nyayo za Rais Jomo Kenyatta, na kweli alifuata nyayo, Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, na akachukua uongozi ule ule na akafanya vile vile. Makabila madogo madogo, Bwana Spika, yalishushwa chini na kuendelezwa kugandamizwa miaka hiyo, Bwana Spika. Ukiangalia Bwana Spika, katika table ama hizi research ambazo zimefanywa kwa universities, utaona Bwana Spika ya kwamba makatibu wa kudumu, wakubwa wa mashirika ya kiserikali, wafanyikazi wa kiserikali, utakuta nafasi za wale wachache wa makabila zilikuwa ni ndogo sana. Bwana Spika, ikafika nafasi ya kwamba wengine unakuta katika department nzima ya serikali ama shirika la serikali watu wanaongea lugha ya kimama ya kinyumbani. Bwana Spika, hoja hii ni muhimu sana ili watu waanze kuelewana na tujaribu kugeuza mambo ambayo yamekuwa donda sugu katika hali ya uchumi na kisiasa hapa Kenya. Bwana Spika, rais wa tatu ambaye tunamsifu sana, yeye alijaribu, lakini mambo yale yale yaliendelea. Rais wa nne hivyo hivyo, Bwana Spika, na tulipopata hii katiba mpya na vile vipengele vyote ambavyo Mheshimiwa Cheptumo amevitaja, katiba hii mpya inasema, Bwana Spika, tujaribu kuleta mabadiliko katika hali ya usimamizi, uchumi, hali ya usimamizi, nafasi za kiserikali, hali za usimamizi katika mashirika ya kiserikali, kwamba makabila madogo, Bwana Spika, yahusishwe na yaingizwe katika serikali. Bwana Spika, tunajua mabadiliko yanaendelea na tunajaribu kuyazungumza haya ili haya yawe katika akili za wale watu ambao wako na nafasi serikalini kwa wakati huu. Bwana Spika, tunachukua nafasi hii kupitia mswada huu yasemwe kiwaziwazi ya kwamba shida hizi mawaziri ambao wamechaguliwa katika ofisi zao waanze kuzitatua, na seneti leo, Bwana Spika, inasema waanze kuzitatua namna hii. Waziri akiwa na ile nafasi ya kuchagua watu direct, yani watu ambao wanachagua kwa mkono wake. Usichague watu ambao ni wa kabila lako peke yake. Jaribu kugeuza, jaribu kuweka hali ambayo inafaa katika wizara yako. Manake ukianza wewe kushuka chini, makatibu watafuata, madirekta watafuata, watu wa ngazi za chini watafuata. Mawaziri wakiwa katika serikalini, waangalie wale ambao wanachukua nafasi katika organizations za serikali, wajaribu kuingiza watu ambao wanatoka sehemu za watu ambao pia hatuna makabila makubwa. Bwana Spika, sahi ukiangalia Tana River, Bwana Spika, hakuna hata managing director mmoja katika parastatal yoyote ya Kenya tunavyoongea sahi, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, Tana River sahi tunaangalia na watu wanaangalia na wanaona machungu yako, na haya mazungumzo lazima tuyaseme ili wanaosikia wajaribu kugeuza. Tunangojea Bwana Spika tuone pengine ambao wameshika manafasi, manake sisi tangu uhuru hatujapata waziri kamili. Tumepata, mimi mwenyewe nimetumikia Bwana Spika kama waziri msaidizi, lakini waziri kamili hatujapata kutoka kaunti ya Tana River, na najua kaunti zingine pia hawajapata. Lakini tunasema mabadiliko yafanyike, waleo na nafasi wageuze ili sisi sote tujisikie tu wana Kenya. Lakini Bwana Spika, hata baada ya kupitishwa hii katiba ambayo ilileta gatuzi 47 Kenya nzima, tumepata shida hata sehemu za magavana. Bwana Spika, shida ambayo imepatikana ni kwamba magavana waligeuza maneno sasa. Magavana wakataka kuwa kama marais, wakajiita His Excellency. Kwanza ilikuwa shida, mwisho ikawa tumekubali sisi sote Kenya tunawaita His Excellency kama rais. Na wao wakaanza kuiga mifano ya marais wa zamani, ya kwamba watachukua zile kabila zao waziweke katika serikali. Zile kabila ndogo ndogo ambazo pengine sehemu zingine ni kabila kubwa, wanakuta hawako serikalini. Bwana Spika, katika gatuzi la Tana River, Bwana Spika, gavana alipelekwa kotini kwa sababu mwananchi alisema kuna sheria ambayo imevunjwa. County Government Act inasema kabisa lazima zile nafasi uzigawanye, lakini magavana hawafuati, Bwana Spika. Na hii maneno lazima tuyaongee. Leo ukiwa Nairobi pengine kabila hilo ni kubwa, ukifika kwa kaunti ya Tana River utakuta kabila hilo, gatuzi la Tana River hilo kabila ni dogo. Lakini wao ni wana Kenya kama Wakenya wa huku. Tunataka tu wa kugeuka. Hii sheria, hii mswada ambao uko mbele yetu inataka kuzungumzia hili jambo, na nyumba ambayo mambo yanaongewa na yakapangwa kama wazee ni hapa. Na tunatuma ujumbe kwa magavana wote ya kwamba Kenya uiangalie kama nchi yako. Usitambue peke yake wale watu ambao walikupigia kura. Usitambue peke yake wale ambao ni kabila lako. Angalia katika serikali yako, na ukitengeza mawaziri wako, ukitengeza wengine, makatibu wako wa kudumu, tafadhali angalia ujue ya kwamba kuna Wakenya wengine hasa makabila madogo madogo. Kaunti ya Tana River, kuna makabila madogo madogo. Makabila yetu makubwa ni Wapokomo, wa Orma na Wardei, lakini kuna kabila kama Wata, kuna kabila wa Giriama ni wachache pale, Wakikuyu ni wachache. Utaona makabila kama Wailwana, Mnyoyaya. Ukiangalia katika serikali ambayo inaundwa, katika county public service, unaona ni nafasi kidogo sana ambazo zinaenda kwa yale makabila madogo. Saa ingine hata yale makabila makubwa unaona inaegemea pande moja, na ikiegemea pande moja inaegemea zaidi clan fulani ndani ya kabila hizo. Bwana Spika, tabia hizi mbaya za kisiasa lazima zikome, na hapa hii bunge ya Senate lazima tusimame kwa umoja, tuseme katika national government, katika county government, tuondoe mambo ya kuweka watu wetu kando, tulete mambo ya kuzungumzia Kenya kama Kenya moja na gatuzi kama gatuzi moja. Mtu asisikie kwa akitoka kaunti hii hawezi kuishi kule kwa sababu hakuna nafasi, hawezi kwenda pale kwa sababu hakuna nafasi. Mtu asisikie hii Kenya, wacha mimi niende nikaishi Uingereza kwa sababu hii Kenya hata nikiwa na talent namna gani siwezi kupata nafasi kubwa hapa Kenya. Hivyo hivyo tunavyosema kwa national government, tunataka katika magatuzi yetu kuwe haki na usawa. Hii ndio hoja ambayo iko hapa mbele, na mimi namshukuru mheshimiwa senator wa gatuzi la huko, mheshimiwa Cheptumo. Tunashukuru sana kwa kuleta haya mazungumzo, kwa sababu lazima tuyazungumze. Unajua kidonda kikiwapo kama hakiwekwi dawa hakiwezi kupona, na saa ingine dawa ni uchungu. Ukiweka kidonda dawa, saa ingine unasikia uchungu. Miaka yetu tulipokuwa wadogo tulikuwa tunawekwa dawa ya blue, ingine inaitwa GV. Ukiweka ile unawashwa kabisa, lakini ndivyo kidonda kinapona. Lazima tuambiane ukweli. Kenya hii kuijenga, Kenya hii kuwa sauti moja, lazima katika magatuzi yetu tufanye ukweli kwa kabila zote. Lazima kwa serikali kuu tufanye ukweli kwa makabila yote. Ndio hii Kenya itembee sawa sawa na vile wananchi wetu wanatarajia. Na si kwa makabila peke yake, lakini pia kwa nafasi za kutoa uchumi, za kuwekezesha uchumi, kujenga uchumi, nafasi za kiserikali. Ndio tuwe na umoja wa ukweli, sio umoja wa mdomo kwa magatuzi yetu na kwa serikali kuu. Bwana Spika, mimi ningeomba maseneta wote ambao watazungumzia hoja hii ya mheshimiwa Cheptumo tuiongee ukweli na tusupport, ili maombi ambayo tumeweka kwa hii motion ya kwamba zile wizara ambayo inahusika pamoja na sehemu za serikali ambazo zinahusika zilete mabadiliko ya kisheria na miungo misingi ambayo itasaidia Kenya hii iwe ni Kenya moja. Tusiseme Kenya hii ni moja lakini wengine wanaumia. Tunataka hii Kenya iwe moja kwa ukweli na kwa uhaki. Kwa hivyo naomba maseneta wote ambao wataizungumzia hii hoja waipatie kuunga mkono. Kwa hayo mengi machache niliongea, naomba sasa sijui Bwana Spika second Kiswahili, lakini second, naomba second. Asante sana Bwana Spika.
Honorable Senators, this motion was moved in an amended form. Therefore, Honorable Senators, I will propose the question in the amended form. That aware that Kenya is a multi-ethnic country with a rich diversity of cultures, languages, and traditions. Further aware that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities face significant social, economic, and political challenges, including discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Acknowledging that Articles 10(2)(b), 21(3), 91(1)(e), 100, 174(e), 177(1), 204(3)(b), 216(4), and the fifth schedule to the Constitution of Kenya obligate the state to promote and protect the welfare of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities. Appreciating that the government has put in place policies, legal and institutional frameworks, including affirmative action programs to address the needs of other persons with disabilities, youth, women, and the elderly. Concerned that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities remain largely undressed through similar interventions due to lack of an existing national policy and legislative framework. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, the National Gender and Equality Commission, National Cohesion and Integration Commission, the Directorate of National Cohesion and Values in the Office of the President, and any other relevant state departments, in collaboration with the Council of Governors. 1, initiate measures to identify and address the specific needs and challenges faced by ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya. And 2, develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisioned in the Constitution of Kenya. I now invite senators to make contribution. Senator Catherine Muma.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very, very important motion. And allow me to congratulate Senator Cheptumo for moving this motion. Mr. Speaker, this motion is about the implementation of the national values and principles as enshrined in our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I specifically want to point out Article 10(1)(b), which talks about human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, non-discrimination, and protection of the rights of the marginalized. Mr. Speaker, that particular provision emphasizes the importance of the principle of equality. It speaks to equality, it speaks to equity, it speaks to social justice, talks about non-discrimination, and talks about inclusiveness. I am glad that the Honorable Senator has brought out the issue about the pain of the marginalization of ethnic communities, certain ethnic communities in this country. Mr. Speaker, ethnic exclusion, tribalism can be analogized to patriarchy. The pain you're feeling, Senator Cheptumo, is the pain that women feel, that the pain that persons with disability feel, the pain that these groups have always with passion tried to persuade this country that it is important that everybody is included. Mr. Speaker, I therefore wholeheartedly would want to ask that as a nation, we need to move to a level where we know that this country and the Constitution that guides this country contemplates a society where everybody matters, where everybody is important, and where every region, every section is as important as any other. A society where
development is planned in an equitable manner. A society where employment is done in an equitable manner. A society where we care enough to recognize that because of the bad manners of past governments, we have left behind our fellow citizens who are equal. And Mr. Speaker, this motion is asking us to therefore implement this article, Article 100, Article 204, which, Mr. Speaker, we have been discussing in this Senate, an article that set aside a special fund to try and bring development, particularly to areas that are marginalized. And areas that are marginalized are not just geographical, physical areas. These are areas that are occupied by people who would otherwise be elsewhere or who would be far if they were given similar opportunity as have been given to people in other regions. Mr. Speaker, I would want, even as we implement, that the mover requires that the National Gender and Equality Commission, which has specific mandate in relation to the minority, to actually bring out a policy, and I support, because equality and equalization has sometimes been narrowed to the issue of only gender, disability, youth, that we must find a way and a policy that specifically addresses the issues of ethnic minorities as persons who are also discriminated against in this country. But as we do so, Honorable Wakili, I'd like to request that we stay faithful to the interpretation in 260 about ethnic minorities. Mr. Speaker, I come from the Luhya community, and if 10 of us have settled in Murang'a, in a neighborhood, we have bought land there, I doubt that this law requires that as the 10 people Luyas who are in Murang'a, we need to be treated as the ethnic minority in similar manner as the El Chamus. That we will be asking for our own infrastructure, having gone there, knowing the Luhya community is among the big communities. So I want to ask that as we do the definition of ethnic communities, we stick to the interpretation as provided for within the Constitution. And as we do so, Mr. Speaker, it is my view that unless it is in policy, unless we have put a measure for performance, it will not happen. And that is why it has not happened since 1963. That's why it is not happening even though we have a constitution that has guidelines. I am proposing that you go further to require that we put in place a few indicators for the national government and other indicators for the county governments, so that every year in the state of address to the nation, the president should be able to tell us how the national government and the different ministries in the execution of their mandates have incorporated the needs of marginalized ethnic communities. If we do that, then we will be able to know that in 2023, the national government employed so many Ilchamus people in these parastatals. And we need, in that policy, to have identified at that time that these are the ethnic communities that we feel have been marginalized historically and need to be brought on board. If we put it that way, they will go out of their way to go and find that person from the ethnic minorities who is qualified in order to be employed. I suggest a similar standard be required of the county governments, so that as we also get reports from county governments, we are able to know how are county governments implementing this obligation of the Constitution, and what evidence do they have to show that they are implementing this particular responsibility. If we go about it that way, then we are able to pick in terms of tangible evidence of real inclusion of these people. Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, I also want to caution against the use of the word mainstreaming and integration. Mainstreaming and integration might mean assimilation. Mr. Speaker, we have had in JLAC an instance where we've had a community that was complaining about being integrated, being given an ID identification number that placed them with another community. That meant that as an ethnic community, they were actually being assimilated and being identified as the other community and not themselves. So integration sometimes can be exclusionary. And I'm suggesting that we must respect the identity of communities that want to be identified, even if they are few. So we should be talking about inclusion and not assimilation. So as we use mainstreaming and integration, we need to do so in a careful manner that it will not end up actually obliterating these communities from their own identities. Mr. Speaker, I hope with those few remarks, I will have enriched the motion as moved, but it's an absolutely important motion that we need to all support. I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wahome Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also like to support the motion by Senator Baringo, Senator Cheptumo. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is time that we as Kenyans aligned ourselves, knowing that we are a nation, and it does not matter the diversity that we have, Mr. Speaker, that has up to now been used to place others, Mr. Speaker. We need to embrace the diversity and know that in it we can draw a lot of strength. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've listened to Senator Mugatana seconding the motion. It is indeed very sad that 60 years after independence, we are still fighting the same battle of marginalization. And as he stated lightly, Mr. Speaker, we saw the white men walk out, the colonialists walk out, well, came in the black colonialists who have up to now successfully been able to suppress the interest of not only of the Kenyans, but of all the Kenyans at whole. The battle before us, Mr. Speaker, must be fought by us all. It must bring us together, united, to ensure that the future generation will never again stand up to discuss this motion, Mr. Speaker, what we are discussing today. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is indeed a great shame that a country that's 60 years old, we are still fighting the same issues that were fought 60 years ago. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to challenge us as the senators that we must come up with measures, that we must come up with legislative frameworks that will ensure that the Constitution that we promulgated 2010 is indeed being implemented. And this cannot be done, Mr. Speaker, if we, as the Senate, we are still blaming the governors whom we should be oversighting for discriminating the minorities in their county. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a challenge that we must live up to, put up the right legal framework so that we ensure that nobody in this Kenya feels like an outsider. But I would also want to say, Mr. Speaker, successful governments have managed now to add into the groups of ethnic minority, to add another group of the downtrodden, and push Kenyans into poverty so that we do not have a voice to talk about our problem. Mr. Speaker, sir, united, and that is why we fought so hard with the Kenya Kwanza government to dismantle the shackles of bondage that has been put into us by the dynasties. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is why we are today standing and saying, after we conduct elections, We want to see the implementation of not only the Constitution, but we want to see people who respect it. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you know where we stand today, there are those who want to make us believe we are at crossroads. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot be. The same names, Mr. Speaker, sir, that have successfully oppressed Kenyans today are telling us Kenya is at crossroads. We are not, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is simply because, Mr. Speaker, sir, those people in leadership today happen to come not from the big names, but from those who had thought that they could never rule this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to say, moving forward, this country, anybody born in this country, have an equal opportunity, and we must put measures in place to ensure that everybody, every one of us gets the equal opportunity, regardless of where you come from, whether marginalized, whether disabled, whether an ethnic minority. You must have equal opportunities. And it is the high time, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we as legislators put the legal framework in place to ensure that every child who goes to school in this country, regardless whether the father is known or unknown, that they have equal opportunity. We can never do that, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we have 1,000,001 examples of... Oh, hold my time, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll continue.
Yes, Senator. Senator Omatinga, you will have 11 more minutes to continue contributing when the motion returns. Honorable Senators, it is now 1 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 2nd August 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
Good morning to you from wherever you're watching this live broadcast from. This is the morning sitting of the proceedings of the Senate, brought to you by the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation in collaboration with the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. This being Wednesday, a lot of agendas has been lined up in the order paper, are ready for deliberations by members of the Senate. And to just take you through the highlights in the order paper this morning is that senators will be debating a motion by Baringo Senator William Cheptumo on the integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya. And in this particular motion, the Senator for Baringo highlights that aware that Kenya is a multi-ethnic country with a rich diversity of cultures, language, and traditions, and further aware that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities do face significant social, economic, and political challenges, including discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. And appreciating that the government has put in place policies. These particular policies are legal and institutional frameworks, including affirmative action programs to address the needs for other special interest groups. These particular interest groups are namely children, persons with disability, and youth, as well as elderly, and concern that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities do remain largely unaddressed through similar interventions due to lack of existing national policy and legislative framework. The Senate urges the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, as well as the National Gender and Equality Commission and other relevant stakeholders and departments in collaboration with the Council of Governors to do two things, one of them being initiating measures to identify as well as address the specific needs and challenges faced by ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya, as well as do develop, this being the second task, to develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution of Kenya. Designation of a monthly free car day as well as the county car-free zones is a motion by nominated Senator Crystal Asige that senators are set to sort of deliberate this morning. Remember, today being Wednesday morning, we have cabinet secretaries appearing before a Senate plenary in the morning, and in the afternoon, we have cabinet secretaries appearing before the plenary of the National Assembly. Today at the Senate, we have a cabinet secretary for water, irrigation, and sanitation, Honorable Alice Wahome, who will be among the cabinet secretaries to appear before Senate this morning. Honorable Alice Wahome will be expected to answer questions from the Honorable Senator for Kirinyaga County, Honorable James Murango, who wants the Cabinet Secretary to provide an update of the status of construction of canals and drains in Mudhini Ward under the Moya Irrigation Development Project, and also state why the construction has delayed. Allow me to hand you over to the chamber as the Speaker, Honorable Amason Kingi, is ready to preside over the business of the Senate.
Blessings, as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you've committed to our charge. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? We do have quorum. Okay, we proceed then. Call in the first order. Clerk, you need to confirm whether the CSs who are listed for purpose of responding to questions are present, so that we can start the proceedings of the day.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Now, honorable senators, the CS in charge of environment, climate change and forestry is already in the House, and therefore we will start with question number 33. It's a question that was asked by Senator James Murango. I'm informed that Senator Methu is holding brief for Senator Murango. And therefore, kindly usher in the CS in charge of environment so that we can start this session. Order, senators. Now, honorable senators, just to, for clarity purposes, I know I had made this communication before, but I'm going to make it once more for purposes of bringing clarity in this session. Now, the senator whose question is the subject of the CS's presence here will be asked, and thereafter the senator whose question is the subject of the response will have an opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. That senator may elect to ask the 2 questions at once, or he may choose not to ask at all a supplementary question, or he may ask 1 question, allow the other senators to ask supplementary questions, and then he comes last or she comes last to ask the supplementary questions. Any other senator wishing to ask a supplementary question can do so, but you're limited to only 1 supplementary question. And avoid speeches, honorable senators, so that we make progress. Because I noticed in the past occasions that a senator would stand and give us a speech. I will struggle to pick a question from that speech, and therefore avoid speeches. Go straight and ask the CS the question. Honorable CS, welcome back. You know you came here, so welcome back home. You know the rules of this house better than I do. And therefore, Clerk, I will proceed to ask Senator Methu to ask the question for and on behalf of Senator Murango.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm standing in for my neighbor, Senator James Kamau Murango, to ask the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Forestry a question. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide the reasons for the failure by the Chief Conservator of Forests to approve the use of land in Jukoine Forest for wayleave and right-of-way for the Ngariama-Jukoine water projects in Kirinyaga County? The second question is, what measures is the government taking to ensure that the land is availed for the seed project, and could the Cabinet Secretary provide the timeline for the commencement and completion of the project?
Honorable CS, kindly proceed to answer the question. And Honorable CS, I notice I have a copy of your response. It's pretty bulky. I'll advise you to go straight to respond to the specific questions, and then the other material contained in your response, you can use it as your reference notes. But just go straight to answer the specific questions. Proceed, Honorable CS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for my immediate former colleagues for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the length of the document in your possession is really just in anticipation of any supplementary issues that may arise, but my response is quite brief, and I'll keep it as such. In the onset, Honorable Speaker, is to say that the ministry I head, the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, is very much aware and alive to the fact that matters of environmental conservation are very critical to this country. But on the same breath, there are certain government projects that may have to, at some instances, conflict with the environmental conservation efforts, and what is therefore the ministry is to strike a very good balance between these two critical aspects of development in our country. Honorable Speaker, the first question, I must say, and the Senator is not here, is a bit, it's in the form of the proverbial response to a mosquito bite with a hammer. Allow me to say that, because I will be demonstrating that indeed the response by the Kenya Forest Service and the ministry to this issue has been very apt, and therefore the question of failure or refusal should not arise. Mr. Speaker, the subject of discussion is a project proposed within the Kadhandeni Forest, which is part of the Mount Kenya Forest ecosystem within Kirinyaga County. The scope of the project is that the government, through the Tana Waterworks Agency, is proposing to improve the Ngariama-Njukini water project through construction of a new intake along a tributary of River Nyamindi. And when you look at the nature of the project, Mr. Speaker, it's really one very noble project to ensure the provision of water access to the people of Kirinyaga County at a very devolved level. Again, the request from the proponent is to have an access road which will involve bush clearance for a distance of 2.6 kilometers along the forest road. And in terms of the engagement that we have had with the project proponent, is that in February of 2023, there was a stakeholder engagement forum which the KFS was represented by the County Forest Conservator. And thereafter, the proponent initiated the mandatory environmental impact assessment study and hydrological assessment for submission to NEMA and the Water Resources Authority for processing and approval. And since the project is located inside a closed indigenous forest within Mount Kenya ecosystem, there are a number of very critical due diligence activities that have to precede the okaying of such a project. Some of the conditions laid out by the Kenya Forest Service, which is the due process, is that these conditions, which are in the form of mitigation, so that as we allow for construction works to go on within protected areas, then we must also ensure that the environmental conservation aspect is not lost. And one of the conditions was the proponent to avoid any unnecessary clearing of trees at the intake site during the construction, the trenching of pipeline laying to be aligned along existing wayleave, the access road to be confined within the forest road up to 4 kilometers and 1.6 kilometers wide, adherence to the conditions for WRA and the AIA license through NEMA. And one of the conditions, Mr. Speaker, which is worth noting for this House and for Kenyans in general, is that we are requiring that any project proponents or proposals for projects to be established within protected areas, they must be matched in equal measure by activities by the proponents to restore the environment to its proper form, so that we don't occasion unnecessary degradation, especially at the wake of the climate change crisis that we are finding ourselves in. So one of the conditions is for the TWDA to rehabilitate 10 hectares of degraded forest within, within Mount Kenya. And that is a small ask to do. As part of the CSR, KFS is negotiating with the proponent to construct a forest rangers camp at Kabirioine Beat, support seedling production at Kadhandeni Tree Nursery, and assist in construction of a footbridge to allow for ease of movement by the forest rangers within the forest. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, in our response to the first question, we have steps that the Kenya Forest Service has to follow before granting clearance for projects of this nature. And one of them, which is very critical, is that the proponents have to get clearance from NEMA in the form of environmental impact assessment licenses. And this one, Mr. Speaker, we cannot have an alternative way around it. And when you look at the project as it is right now, Mr. Speaker, the proponents have not yet acquired the clearance from NEMA and the Water Resources Authority. And my request, Mr. Speaker, is that we may need to do engagements, and the leader of majority is here, so that by the time we bring these questions to this level, Mr. Speaker, they should have at least gone through the due processes, so that we don't have to prosecute them in public before the processes are completed, because they end up prejudicing the agencies that have to do due diligence and ensure adherence to the due processes of the law. So when you look, Mr. Speaker, at the dates when the application was done to Kenya Forest Service, which was in March this year, I'm just trying to move quickly so that I don't have to go word for word. The application came to us on 13th of March, and immediately the Kenya Forest Service began the process of taking the request through the technical committee of the board